Right now, we're following breaking news in one of the most high-profile murder cases in the state. An autopsy release shows Suzanne Morphew's cause of death is homicide.
It's been more than 4 months since Suzanne Morphew went out for a bike ride on Mother's Day.
And after countless searches, there's little information about what happened to her. Her family, though, is determined to find out.
The mom of two went missing in Chaffee County in 2020, and her remains were discovered 3 years later.
You and I watched and we broke down the recovery, or as they were showing it from the local news. How does this recovery take the 5 days to identify? Is this now through dental record? Could you go into that aspect of it? What happens in
I would think dental records would go first, because now, after the full photography and recovery and mapping and all that's done at the field, all the human remains have to be packaged up and then brought back to the medical examiner's office, because now they have to inventory what's here. Are there missing bones? If so, which bones are missing? Go back out and look for them. Now, so they inventory everything, photograph everything.
You had said some interesting things that are coming back into play in this autopsy report, is that you talked about some recovery of like bugs and so forth.
Back in September, that they had found the skeletal remains, okay? And then we saw images, we saw the location, we saw people working there, we saw crime scene investigators, tie back, backhoes, the shovels, sifting, all this good stuff that should be occurring out there.
We're going to do a breakdown of the forensic autopsy, and we're going to talk about a lot of different things that is right up your alley. And as a matter of fact, some of the experts in the trades, our forensic anthropologist and the forensic pathologist, happen to be colleagues and friends of yours. Tonight we may get into some sensitive topics, some things that might not be good for some people. If you suffer from PTSD, here's your trigger warning. Bugs. Where do the bugs come into play some 2 years later? How do these bugs come into play?
They can help establish time of death, or in this case, time of deposit of the body at this location. You'll have generations of bugs that will come and go, and they'll leave their evidence of themselves. But there at the scene, you'll have dead bugs, you have live bugs, and you'll be able to count how many generations are there, and maybe that could help you determine about what time of the year and when she was deposited at the location.
With that amount of time going on and the changes of season, skeletal remains, teeth, hair, clothing, fibers, recovery of like bugs and so forth. So Ed, you want to just talk about how important those forensics are in cases like this and how it can tie back in this perpetrator? Because we know Barry Morphew, his charges were dropped, but they were dropped so with the stipulation that they could rearrest him.
Very hurtful to lose your reputation, integrity.
CBI also announcing no arrests have been made since the body was identified. Important fact here: when charges were dropped against Barry Morphew, prosecutors said it was too difficult to pursue first-degree murder charges without a body. Now they have the remains, they have the body.
So
right, they were dropped without prejudice, which means that if the prosecutor has a prosecutable case, they can go at it again because there's no double jeopardy here. He never stood trial. That said,
that's the big question. Will they now recharge Barry Morphew? And that remains to be seen. That amount of time going on and the changes of season.
Let's see if any evidence is found from where the body was recovered that links directly back to him.
At this point, Barry is a free man and is not facing any charges. The autopsy report confirms that Suzanne was found with her bike clothing in a shallow grave in Saguache County. Investigators believe that she went on a bike ride on Mother's Day of 2020 and never returned.
You can see in the autopsy report there that they did recover insects, and so they're submitting those insects for analysis.
While we are still waiting for the report to be released to us, CBI says it was shared with the Morphew family. CBI says Morphew's death is still undetermined, but did say these drugs you see on your screen were involved. The National Institute of Health explains the first is a synthetic opioid painkiller, and the second is a sedative commonly used as a tranquilizer for pigs and elephants. The FDA says the last is a sedative that can decrease an animal's heart rate and is commonly used by veterinarians. Now,
these 4 listed synthetic opioid and so forth, everybody's going nuts about this. could this potentially be that cap that was found, that dart cap? Could they tie this back in, Ed? And again, these are possibilities.
You know, unless he mixed his own concoction, not all of these things are going to be found to have used and even admitted to using on animals, okay? There are several things that are going on here, but, you know, it's highly suspicious that, you know, he had that kind of tranquilizer gun, and several of these things are, in fact, tranquilizers, okay? That you could get darts with these mixtures in it, except for the synthetic opioid painkiller. Okay.
Sometimes out in the backwoods or out in remote areas, they can get a hold of stuff like this from veterinarians, as they said. Mm-hmm. He was an avid hunter. His whole home was, you know, trophies and antlers and all kinds of hides and so forth in his garage. But I remember, and folks in the chat, let us know if you remember this. There was reports in the arrest affidavit and some of the documents and court documents that Suzanne Morphew's phone was traveling about that house. Yeah. And, you know, you look at this stuff and you look at, there was a dart cap, right? Ed, is that how they described it? A cap?
Tranquilizer dart cap was found in the dryer with clothing. Yes, and the cell phone data shows that she was running around the house as if she was being chased. And remember, she had a chemo port that was in her body. Yeah. So, I mean, there's any number of things here. I mean, he admitted to having the tranquilizer dart gun and that he was tranquilizing deer and other animal in and around his house. But later on, we'll see the lawyer says, well, there are plenty of people that have those in that area. Yeah, but your client had one and he admitted to it, okay? And then the cap for it just so happens to be in the dryer with the clothing.
It just
at the time she goes missing.
Yeah, it drives me crazy, Ed, to hear these defense attorneys, how they will, no matter what, it doesn't matter what comes up, they're going to come up with a defense, and that's their job.
And he could not have killed his wife. She got up the morning of Mother's Day, had her cup of coffee. That is now confirmed with the autopsy report. Also confirmed with the autopsy report was that she put on her bike clothes, and we know where the bike was found. So she was on a bike ride and abducted. The tranquilizer that was found in her bones, allegedly, is a very common animal tranquilizer that could be used on farms or by hunters, which are people that are very prevalent in that area in Salina.
They're there to defend Barry Morphew. And as much as we don't like that, it's part of the your constitutional right is to have somebody that you hire, and he's paid big bucks to have these high-powered lawyers defending him.
I mean, okay, I get that. That's your right. But then she makes some outrageous claims that are totally inaccurate and not forensically true.
Barry's attorney also tells us that a bullet was found in the shallow grave near the town of Moffett, where Suzanne was located. At this point, we don't know where the case goes from here, though. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation confirms they continue to investigate, though they won't say if there is currently a suspect or suspects in this case.
I'm thinking about this and thinking, how could this have occurred? Let's just say somebody tranquilized her with a dart. And when she gets passed out, now she has this chemo port there, which he can then inject the opioid in.
I never thought of it like that, Ed. Yeah. And that was a conversation that came up. That was a topic of conversation by many of our troops.
I had it. I remember us talking about it back before she was found.
The only other possibility is, again, that he didn't utilize that port, and he could have just injected it into her arm or into a vein, or however they did that. Because now, when we have her remains recovered, we're not looking at a body. We're looking at bones.
Skeletal remains. That is correct.
Skeletal remains, and that's where, if anything, this recovery, if it would have happened weeks after, months, maybe even months after, we would have had a lot more to work with forensically to answer definitively those questions. Hey, we asked Barbara Butcher about how long do sedatives or narcotics last in bones. And she gave us that answer. Ed, do you remember what she said? How does it get into the bones, Ed?
It gets into the long bones, into the marrow. The blood brings it there.
So it's brought to the bones via blood, the bloodstream. Mm-hmm. Fascinating.
Tranquilize animals. That's a major development in this case because prosecutors have alleged for years that her husband, Barry Morphew, shot her with a tranquilizer before killing her.
Hey, be careful with that. That's the most powerful tranq gun on the market. Huh.
and they're going to go camping. They're going camping on Mother's Day, not seeing the mom.
When the rest of the world is in lockdown.
The rest of the world's in a lockdown. I know in certain parts of the country it was a little different. Barry's going to do a work job at some hotel where he's dumping big amounts of garbage bags. It just, something just doesn't smell right to me.